Hello, and welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know, which geographical location are you joining from today? At home? On the go? Share with us below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Architect. Dominic Voss stood at the precipice of the Los Angeles skyline, surveying the city from his penthouse terrace. At 36, he had built Vostech into a billion-dollar security firm that specialized in protective systems for high-profile clients. His fingers traced the edge of his whiskey glass as he contemplated his latest acquisition, not a company, but an engagement ring for Valencia Reed. The son of a military strategist and a criminal psychologist, Dominic had inherited his father's tactical precision and his mother's understanding of human weakness. Growing up in Colorado, he learned that preparation meant survival when his parents' safe house was attacked by a criminal organization seeking revenge. Dominic had watched, hidden in a panic room, as his father eliminated 3 intruders with calculated efficiency. Never hesitate when someone threatens what's yours, his father had told him afterward. And never, ever forgive betrayal. Those lessons shaped him into the man who now commanded respect in boardrooms and fear in negotiations. Few people knew the depths of his resolve. His public persona was charming, generous, brilliant. But beneath lay the capacity for ruthlessness that had helped him crush 6 competitors in the last decade alone. Valencia had entered his life like a storm. Beautiful, vibrant, seemingly genuine. They met at a charity gala, where she worked as an event coordinator. Her wit matched his, and her ambition seemed to complement rather than compete with his own. After 8 months of dating, he proposed, drawn to her independence and sharp mind. "You're different," she told him on their 3rd date. "Most successful men want trophies. You want a partner." He believed her, the first mistake in a lifetime of meticulous judgment. The call from Preston Whitfield, his childhood friend and head of security, interrupted his thoughts. The background check came back on read. Preston said without preamble, "There's something you need to see." Dominic's grip tightened on the glass. "Bring it over. Now." 30 minutes later, Preston laid out 5 surveillance photos on Dominic's desk. Valencia entering a hotel. Valencia embracing a man. Valencia kissing that man passionately. "That's Riker Caldwell," Preston explained. I know exactly who he is," Dominic said, his voice deadly quiet. "Riker Caldwell, the owner of Rival Edge Securities, Vostech's most aggressive competitor. The man who had tried to poach Dominic's clients through increasingly underhanded tactics over the past 3 years. She's meeting him twice a week? Minimum," Preston continued. "Started 3 months ago. Phone records show calls dating back further." Dominic didn't move, didn't betray any emotion as he memorized every detail of the photos. "Find me everything. Every email, every text, every call. I want to know what they're planning." "Dom." Preston hesitated. "The engagement party is in 2 weeks. Do you want to just confront her now?" A cold smile formed on Dominic's face. "No, I think I'll wait for a more appropriate moment." Preston recognized that smile. It was the same one Dominic had worn when he systematically dismantled the career of a board member who tried to orchestrate a hostile takeover. "What are you going to do?" Preston asked. Dominic turned to look out at the city again. "I'm going to give Valencia and Riker exactly what they deserve. A moment they'll never forget." Chapter 2. The Deception. Valencia Reed stepped out of her silver BMW, her designer heels clicking against the pavement as she entered Riker Caldwell's beach house in Malibu. Her heart raced with the thrill of deception as much as with anticipation. "He suspects nothing?" Riker asked, pulling her into his arms the moment the door closed. "Please," Valencia scoffed. "Dominic Voss may be a genius with security systems, but he's blind when it comes to me. Men like him, powerful, isolated, they're desperate to believe someone actually loves them for who they are." Riker chuckled, his hands trailing down her back. "And the engagement party preparations?" "Everything's set. 200 of the most influential people in tech and security. The perfect audience for our little announcement." She smiled, a predatory gleam in her eyes. After I publicly humiliate him and join forces with you, his clients will be scrambling to jump ship. At 34, Valencia had perfected the art of strategic relationships. Raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to make ends meet in Detroit, she learned early that beauty and intelligence could be weapons. Her mother had died when Valencia was 19, leaving her with crushing debt and a fierce determination to never be vulnerable again. "You're brilliant," Riker murmured against her neck. "That's why we're perfect together." Riker Caldwell, 42, had built Rival Edge through aggressive tactics and cutthroat ambition. The son of wealthy but emotionally distant parents, he'd grown up with everything except validation. He collected victories like trophies, and stealing Dominic's fiancée, along with his market share, would be his crowning achievement. What neither of them knew was that Dominic Voss had installed a security system in Valencia's car 3 months earlier, not out of suspicion, but as a birthday gift to keep her safe. Every conversation was recorded, every location tracked. Meanwhile, Valencia's assistant Naomi Park sat in her apartment, increasingly troubled by her boss's scheme. Valencia had brought Naomi into her confidence months ago, believing her loyalty was assured by a substantial bonus promise. But Naomi's conscience weighed heavily as she watched Valencia plan Dominic's public humiliation. Dominic had always treated Naomi with respect during their interactions, unlike Valencia, who frequently belittled her. One evening, after particularly cruel comments from Valencia about pathetic people like Dominic who confuse fear with respect, Naomi made a decision. She dialed Preston Whitfield's number. "Mr. Whitfield? This is Naomi Park, Valencia Reed's assistant. There's something you and Mr. Voss need to know." The following day, Preston briefed Dominic on his meeting with Naomi. She provided copies of emails between Valencia and Riker dating back nearly a year. "Before you even met her," Preston explained. "They planned this from the beginning. Valencia approached you specifically because Riker identified you as his main competitor." Dominic's expression remained impassive, but his eyes turned glacial. "Continue. Their plan is to announce their relationship at the engagement party. Valencia will humiliate you publicly, claim she never loved you, and leave with Riker. They're anticipating that the shock will damage your reputation enough that several of your clients will lose confidence and move to Rival Edge." Dominic tapped his fingers methodically on his desk, the only sign of his internal calculation. "Sir," Preston added, "there's something else. According to Naomi, they've also been working to access Voss Teach's client database. Valencia has been trying to copy files from your home office." For the first time, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed Dominic's face, quickly replaced by cold fury. His home, the one place he had allowed himself to be vulnerable. "Preston," Dominic said, his voice unervingly calm, "I believe it's time we prepare a special surprise for our engagement party." Chapter 3. The Infiltration. For the next week, Dominic continued his routine as if nothing had changed. He smiled at Valencia over dinner, discussed wedding plans, and pretended not to notice when she worked late. In public, he played the role of devoted fiancé perfectly. In private, he set his plan in motion. First, he approached Naomi Park directly. The young woman was terrified when Dominic's car pulled alongside her as she walked home. "Ms. Park," he said, rolling down the window, "please, I'd like to talk." Inside a quiet cafe, Dominic studied Valencia's assistant. She was intelligent, observant, and clearly remorseful about her involvement. "Why did you come forward?" he asked. Naomi hesitated. "Because what they're planning is cruel." And because she paused, gathering courage. "Because Valencia isn't who you think she is." "I'm beginning to realize that," Dominic replied with unexpected gentleness. "Tell me everything, Ms. Park. Leave nothing out." Naomi revealed how Valencia had systematically gathered information about Dominic's vulnerabilities, how she'd laughed with Riker about his pathetic trust in her, and how they planned to use the engagement party to destroy him personally and professionally. "They've even rehearsed it," Naomi explained. "Valencia has this whole speech prepared about how she never loved you, how it was all about your connections and position." Dominic nodded, his expression unreadable. "And you're willing to help me counter their plan?" "Yes," Naomi said firmly. "What do you need me to do?" What Dominic needed was access to Valencia's communications, to Riker's planning, to every detail of their scheme. With Naomi's help, he began methodically gathering evidence. Through Naomi, Dominic planted specialized spyware on Valencia's devices. Through his company's resources, he conducted deep surveillance on Riker Caldwell. What he discovered was more extensive than he had initially thought. Valencia and Riker had been targeting more than just his company. They had a list of his clients, complete with personalized strategies to poach each one after the public humiliation. They had documented his personal habits, his few weaknesses, even his childhood traumas, all to maximize the damage of their betrayal. Most disturbing was the discovery that Valencia had been secretly recording intimate conversations, planning to leak selected portions that would paint Dominic as unstable and ruthless. Ironically, the very qualities he kept most carefully controlled. They're thorough, Preston observed as they reviewed the evidence in Dominic's secure office. Yes, Dominic agreed, but not thorough enough. He had discovered a crucial weakness in their plan. Valencia's ambition exceeded Riker's loyalty. In private emails to a friend, Valencia had outlined a secondary strategy, using Riker to destroy Dominic, then leveraging the information she'd gathered on both men to establish her own connections in the industry. She's planning to betray him too, eventually, Dominic noted with cold amusement. Poetic, really. As the engagement party approached, Dominic expanded his team. Besides Preston and Naomi, he brought in Lena Winters, his company's digital forensics expert, and Cameron Boyd, his most trusted attorney. Together, they crafted a response that would not merely counter Valencia and Riker's attack, but would turn it back on them with devastating precision. 2 days before the engagement party, Dominic called a final meeting with his team. "Everyone clear on their roles?" he asked. They nodded, each understanding that what they were about to do went beyond corporate maneuvering. This was personal for Dominic, and they had never seen him so coldly determined. "Valencia believes she found my weakness," Dominic told them. "She thinks it's my trust, my willingness to believe she loved me." He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She's about to discover my actual weakness. I don't forgive. Ever." The night before the engagement party, Valencia slipped into bed beside Dominic, kissing his cheek with well-practiced affection. "Nervous about tomorrow?" she asked, feigning sweetness. Dominic pulled her close, his embrace betraying nothing of what he knew. "Not at all," he replied truthfully. "I've been looking forward to it for weeks now." In the darkness, Valencia smiled, believing it was the smile of a man blissfully unaware of his impending humiliation. She couldn't see Dominic's eyes, cold, focused, and already seeing the aftermath of the destruction he had planned for her and Riker. The stage was set. Chapter 4. The Revelation. The grand ballroom of the Archer Hotel gleamed with elegant decorations for what Los Angeles society believed was a celebration of love. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over 200 guests, technology executives, security experts, venture capitalists, and social elites. Valencia Reed moved through the crowd like a queen, resplendent in a custom-designed white gown that hugged her figure perfectly. She accepted congratulations with practiced grace, her eyes occasionally meeting Riker Caldwell's across the room. He stood with a group of investors, handsome in his tailored suit, sipping champagne and checking his watch. At precisely 9:30 p.m., Dominic Voss took the stage. The room quieted as he tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice warm and engaging. "Valencia and I are overwhelmed by your support." Valencia moved toward the stage, right on cue. This was the moment they had planned. Dominic would invite her up, and instead of joining him in celebration, she would deliver her devastating announcement. "Before my beautiful fiancée joins me," Dominic continued, "I wanted to share something special with all of you." A flicker of confusion crossed Valencia's face. This wasn't part of the expected script. Dominic smiled directly at her. "Valencia has taught me so much about trust, about vulnerability, about what it means to let someone into your life completely." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Valencia froze, suddenly uncertain. "In fact," Dominic continued, I have some of Valencia's own words to share with you all. He nodded to Preston, who stood by the ballroom's control panel. The lights dimmed slightly, and a massive wall screen behind Dominic illuminated. An email appeared, enlarged for all to see. From Valencia Reed to Riker Caldwell. Subject: the plan. Riker, everything is proceeding perfectly. Dominic suspects nothing. The fool actually believes I love him. I've never met someone so brilliant in business, yet so pathetically blind in his personal life. The engagement party will be our perfect opportunity. I'll wait until he calls me on stage. Then I'll announce that it was all a charade. The look on his face when I tell everyone I'm leaving him for you will be priceless. With his reputation in tatters and his confidence shattered, his clients will be looking for more stable options. Rival Edge will be perfectly positioned to step in, and you've promised me a substantial role in the new venture. Just 2 more weeks of pretending to love this man, and we'll have everything we wanted. Valencia. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Valencia stood transfixed, her face draining of color as her own words condemned her before everyone who mattered in their industry. But Dominic wasn't finished. Another email appeared on screen. From Valencia Reed to Layla Manning. Subject: the real plan. Layla, I know I've told you about using Dominic for his connections, but there's more. Once I've helped Riker destroy Vostek, I'll have enough dirt on both men to strike out on my own. Riker is just as arrogant as Dominic, just as easy to manipulate with the right combination of admiration and sex. Men are so predictable. By this time next year, I'll have leveraged their destruction into my own position of power. Why be the woman behind successful men when I can step over their corpses? Don't worry, I'll remember who my real friends are when I'm on top. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Valencia stood paralyzed, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. Riker Caldwell's face contorted with rage as he realized he too had been played. Valencia, Dominic's voice cut through the chaos, eerily calm. I believe you had something you wanted to announce. She stumbled forward, desperation in her eyes. Dominic, I can explain. You actually believed I loved you? Valencia's recorded voice boomed through the speakers, a conversation captured in her car. IT was all for your connections. The real Valencia flinched as her rehearsed speech played for all to hear. Dominic stepped closer to the microphone, his expression now hardened. I believe you're planning to announce you're leaving me for my biggest rival. He gestured toward Riker, who was already backing toward the exit, abandoning Valencia as quickly as his ambition allowed. Riker, Valencia called out, panic rising in her voice as he turned away from her. Dominic's voice remained steady. As of this moment, Valencia, you have no access to my home, my company, or my life. Your belongings have been packed and delivered to your mother's old address in Detroit. The one you claimed was a quaint family home rather than the foreclosed property it actually is. Valencia's composure shattered. You can't do this to me. I just did, Dominic replied, then addressed the shocked audience. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. The bar will remain open, and I hope you'll stay to celebrate what this night has truly become. Not an engagement party, but a liberation. As security escorted a hysterical Valencia from the ballroom, Dominic stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted before him, faces showing a mixture of shock, amazement, and newfound respect tinged with fear. Preston approached him quietly. That went exactly as planned. No, Dominic corrected. That was just phase 1. Chapter 5, The Aftermath. In the week following the engagement party, Valencia Reed's life unraveled with terrifying speed. Her professional reputation lay in ruins. Clients canceled contracts with her event planning business. Her social media accounts flooded with messages of disgust. She called Dominic incessantly, 315 calls in 7 days. He answered none. Riker Caldwell didn't fare better. Major clients, concerned about his judgment and ethics, began quietly moving their business away from Rival Edge. Investors requested emergency meetings. His board of directors called for an internal investigation. Meanwhile, Dominic Voss maintained perfect composure in public. He gave no interviews, made no statements beyond a brief press release, My personal relationships remain personal matters, and I'm focused on continuing to provide exceptional security solutions to our valued clients. Privately, however, Dominic was executing the next phases of his plan. In his downtown office, he met with Naomi Park, who had been instrumental in exposing Valencia's scheme. "Your loyalty won't be forgotten," he told her. "I've arranged a position for you at Meridian Communications. The CEO owes me a favor, and they need someone with your skills and integrity." Naomi's eyes widened. Meridian was one of the top PR firms in the country. "Mr. Voss, I don't know what to say." "Say nothing about what happened, and we'll consider it even," Dominic replied. "But remember what you witnessed. Betrayal has consequences." Later that day, Preston updated Dominic on Valencia's desperate attempts to salvage her situation. She approached 3 different networks, trying to sell her side of the story. None would touch it after seeing the emails. "She's staying at a motel off Sunset. Credit cards are maxed out, and her car has been repossessed." Dominic nodded, expression unchanged. And Riker, damage control. He's claiming Valencia manipulated him, that he was a victim too. Not many are buying it, especially after the recording of him discussing how to poach her client surfaced. Dominic allowed himself a small smile. How unfortunate that anonymous tip reached the technology blogs. Preston hesitated before continuing. "There's something else. Valencia has been trying to contact your sister Marissa." For the first time, genuine surprise registered on Dominic's face. His relationship with his younger sister was one of the few purely positive connections in his life. They weren't close. Marissa had chosen a quiet life as a veterinarian in Oregon, deliberately distanced from Dominic's high-stakes world, but they maintained a warm, if infrequent, relationship. "Has Marissa responded?" "No," Preston assured him. "But Valencia seems desperate to find any leverage against you." Dominic's expression darkened. "Monitor the situation. If Valencia makes any move toward my sister, accelerate the timeline." "Are you sure?" Preston asked quietly. "What we plan for Phase 3 is necessary." Dominic cut him off. "Valencia and Riker didn't just try to humiliate me. They attempted to destroy everything I've built. Actions have consequences." That evening, Dominic received an unexpected visitor at his penthouse. Lena Winters, his digital forensics expert, arrived with a flash drive. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. It wasn't in the original surveillance. The drive contained a video of Valencia and Riker, recorded 3 months earlier. They were discussing not just professional sabotage, but personal destruction. "We need to hit him where it actually hurts," Riker was saying. His parents. That military compound attack in his childhood. It left scars. If we reference it publicly, suggest his father's actions were less heroic than reported. Valencia's laugh was cold. "Perfect. Trauma is such an effective weapon." Dominic watched him passively, but a muscle twitched in his jaw, the only sign of the rage building within him. They had planned to use his parents' deaths, his most painful memory, as a tool for public humiliation. "Where did you find this?" he asked Lena. "Encrypted partition on Riker's personal server." He thought it was secure. She hesitated. "Dominic, they were going to claim your father failed to protect those in his care, that his actions led to unnecessary deaths." The lie struck at the core of Dominic's being. His father had died saving others, had sacrificed himself when the compound came under attack. Dominic stood, his decision made. "Thank you, Lena. This changes the timeline. Contact Preston and Cameron. We move to Phase 3 immediately." As Lena left, Dominic turned to the city skyline, his reflection superimposed over the lights of Los Angeles. In that moment, his expression held no trace of the public figure known for controlled charm. This was the face few ever saw, the tactician who had learned from his father that some threats must be eliminated completely. Valencia and Riker had crossed a line they didn't even know existed. They hadn't just targeted his business or his heart. They had targeted his legacy, his very identity. For that, there would be no simple public humiliation, no mere professional setback. Dominic picked up his phone and dialed Preston. "Initiate scorched earth," he said simply, and hung up. Phase 3 had begun. Chapter 6, The Counterattack. Riker Caldwell strode purposefully through Rival Edge's headquarters, projecting confidence he no longer felt. The company's stock had dropped 12% since the engagement party fiasco. Two major clients had already jumped ship, with others sending ominous signals about reviewing their security needs. His executive assistant hurried alongside him. The board is assembled in the conference room. They're requesting immediate access to all communications between you and Valencia Reed. Riker suppressed a flash of panic. Tell them I'll address their concerns directly and get legal on the phone. He stopped cold as he entered his office. Dominic Voss sat calmly in Riker's chair, examining a glass paperweight from a desk. Security breach. Riker snapped at his assistant. Call. Security knows I'm here, Dominic interrupted, setting down the paperweight. In fact, as of 20 minutes ago, I own controlling interest in Rival Edge Securities. Riker's face contorted. That's impossible. Is it? Dominic stood slowly. Your company's value has been in free fall. I've been quietly acquiring shares through various holdings for months, well before you and Valencia hatched your little scheme. This morning, I made an offer to your three largest institutional investors. They accepted with remarkable enthusiasm. Blood drained from Riker's face as he realized the trap had been set long before he even met Valencia. Why? He managed to ask. Dominic moved around the desk, his calm more terrifying than any display of anger. Originally, this was simply business. Rival Edge has valuable patents, a decent client list. I planned a standard acquisition. His eyes hardened. Then you made it personal. He picked up a remote and turned on the wall screen, displaying the video Lena had discovered. Riker and Valencia discussing using Dominic's parents against him. That, Dominic said quietly, was your fatal mistake. Riker backed toward the door. Look, that was Valencia's idea. I never intended. Sit down, Dominic commanded, his voice suddenly carrying such authority that Riker complied instinctively. Your board is currently reviewing evidence of multiple ethics violations, client privacy breaches, and financial irregularities that my team has uncovered. Fabricated? No. Selectively compiled? Perhaps. Dominic smiled coldly. You'll be voted out by noon. You can't destroy me like this, Riker protested weakly. I'm not destroying you, Riker. I'm absorbing you. Rival Edge will become a subsidiary of Vostech, handling our less prestigious clients. You, however, will receive a generous severance package, contingent upon your immediate resignation and a comprehensive non-compete agreement. Dominic placed a document before Riker. Sign, and you walk away wealthy but irrelevant. Refuse, and I release everything we've found to the SEC, the press, and your clients. Riker stared at the document, realizing he had severely underestimated Dominic Voss. You planned this all along. You knew about Valencia and me before the engagement party. Of course I did, Dominic replied. I knew the day after your first meeting with her. Did you really think I wouldn't protect what's mine? Across town, Valencia Reed faced her own reckoning. Evicted from her motel when her credit card was declined, she had resorted to calling old friends for help. None returned her calls. As she sat in a coffee shop, nursing a single cup to maintain access to Wi-Fi, her phone displayed a news alert. Rival Edge Securities acquired by Vostech. CEO Caldwell resigns. Valencia's hands trembled. Riker had abandoned her, and now Dominic had destroyed him too. She was truly alone. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered desperately. Valencia Reed. A woman's professional voice responded. This is Cameron Boyd, legal counsel for Dominic Voss. Valencia's heart raced. Is he willing to talk to me? Please, I need to explain. Mr. Voss has no interest in further communication with you. Cameron cut her off. I'm calling to inform you that we've documented your attempts to contact his sister Marissa. Any further communication with Mr. Voss or his family will result in immediate legal action. I just need 5 minutes with him, Valencia pleaded. What does he want from me? Money? A public apology. Mr. Voss wants nothing from you, Cameron replied coldly. That's precisely the point. You no longer exist to him. After the call ended, Valencia sat frozen, the full impact of Dominic's revenge becoming clear. He hadn't just humiliated her publicly. He had systematically erased her from the life she had built. No career, no connections, no resources. Meanwhile, Dominic met with his core team to finalize the Rival Edge acquisition. Rival Edge clients have been notified of the management change, Cameron reported. Most are staying, at least for now. And our special project? Dominic inquired. Preston nodded. The trust is established. Anonymous, untraceable to you. Dominic smiled slightly. Good. Transfer the funds. Later that evening, Valencia received another call, this time from a law firm she didn't recognize. Ms. Reed, I'm calling regarding the estate of Eleanor Reed, the attorney stated formally. Valencia's breath caught. Her mother had died with nothing but debts. There's been a development, the attorney continued. An anonymous trust has paid off all outstanding debts on your mother's property and established a maintenance fund. The house has been transferred to your name. I don't understand, Valencia whispered. Who would do this? The benefactor wishes to remain anonymous. All I can tell you is that the trust is called Consequences. As Valencia processed this information, another email arrived on her phone. It contained a one-way ticket to Detroit, scheduled for the following morning. Across the city, Dominic Voss sat alone in his penthouse, a glass of whiskey in hand. Preston had questioned the decision to provide Valencia with her mother's house. Why give her anything, he had asked. After what she planned? Dominic's answer was simple. Because now she'll know, every single day, that even her shelter comes from my mercy. That everything she has exists because I allow it. He had taken a sip of his drink. That's not kindness, Preston. It's ownership. As night fell over Los Angeles, the three players in this drama faced very different futures. Riker Caldwell, once a fierce competitor, now faced professional exile with a golden parachute that would never compensate for his lost reputation. Valencia Reed, once poised to humiliate a billionaire, now survived on his calculated charity. And Dominic Voss, seemingly the victim in their scheme, emerged more powerful than before. His company expanded, his reputation enhanced by his composed handling of betrayal. But Dominic wasn't finished. Not yet. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. 3 months after the engagement party, Valencia Reed lived a quiet existence in her childhood home in Detroit. The house had been immaculately restored, another reminder of Dominic's meticulous attention to detail. She had found work at a local event planning company, her talents still valuable even if her reputation was tarnished. Each night, she returned to the house that represented both shelter and prison. Every comfort she enjoyed came from the man she had tried to destroy. The psychological weight of this knowledge proved heavier than any direct punishment could have been. On a cold November evening, Valencia arrived home to find a sleek black car parked outside. Her heart stuttered when Preston Whitfield emerged. Ms. Reed, he greeted her formally. Mr. Voss requests a meeting. He's here, she asked, scanning the street nervously. No, but he's prepared to speak with you if you're willing. Hope flared in Valencia's chest. Perhaps Dominic had finally relented, was ready to hear her explanation, her apology. Preston led her to the car, where a secure tablet had been set up. When activated, Dominic's face appeared on screen, as composed and unreadable as ever. Valencia, he acknowledged simply. She leaned forward eagerly. Dominic, thank you for... This isn't reconciliation, he interrupted. This is notification. Her expression faltered. I don't understand. You've been attempting to contact Riker Caldwell, Dominic stated. Despite the non-communication clause in his severance agreement, Valencia paled. She had indeed reached out to Riker, seeking an ally in her isolation. How did you... I know everything you do, Dominic said matter-of-factly. Every call, every email, every desperate attempt to rebuild what you destroyed. He leaned closer to the camera. I want you to understand something, Valencia. Your current situation isn't punishment. It's containment. What does that mean? She whispered. It means that as long as you live quietly in Detroit, work your modest job, and never attempt to re-enter my world, you continue to exist in this managed state. His voice remained eerily calm. But should you attempt to contact anyone from my past or present, should you try to reconstruct any influence in the security or technology sectors, the containment ends. Valencia felt cold fear spread through her. And then you'll discover what actual punishment looks like. For the first time, emotion flickered in his eyes, a cold, controlled fury that made her shrink back. What you're experiencing now is mercy, Valencia. Don't mistake it for weakness. The screen went black, leaving Valencia shaking in the back seat of the car. Preston escorted her back to her front door. "One more thing," he said, handing her an envelope. "All records of your actions have been compiled here. Emails, texts, recordings. Copies have been placed in secure locations, to be released if you violate the terms Mr. Voss outlined." "He really hates me that much?" Valencia asked, her voice small. Preston studied her with something like pity. "Mr. Voss doesn't hate you, Ms. Reed. That would require emotional investment. You're simply a potential threat that's been neutralized." Across the country, Dominic ended the video call and turned to Cameron Boyd, who had observed the exchange. "She'll comply," Dominic said with certainty. Cameron nodded. "And Riker? He's been making inquiries about rebuilding in Europe." "Let him try," Dominic replied dismissively. "The non-compete is international. Besides, I've acquired controlling interest in the venture capital firm he's approaching." "Thorough as always," Cameron commented. "Though I have to ask, why not simply destroy them completely? You certainly have the means." Dominic swirled the whiskey in his glass. "Because this way, they live with the consequences. Every day, they wake up knowing they're only functioning because I permit it. That's far more satisfying than any quick destruction." Later that evening, Dominic received a call from his sister Marissa, their monthly check-in. He maintained these calls faithfully, one of the few personal rituals he allowed himself. "The clinic is doing well," Marissa told him, "though I'm still working too many hours." "You should hire more help," Dominic suggested, his tone softening as it always did with her. "Not everyone has your resources, big brother," she laughed. After a pause, she added, "I heard about what happened with your engagement. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he assured her. "It was handled." Something in his voice made Marissa hesitate. "Dom, you didn't do anything extreme, did you?" "Nothing they didn't deserve," he replied simply. Marissa sighed. "You know, normal people just get drunk and badmouth their exes to friends." "I've never aspired to normality," Dominic said with rare humor. After ending the call, Dominic stood at his window overlooking the city. The engagement party debacle had paradoxically enhanced his reputation. Where clients had once seen a brilliant but perhaps conventional CEO, they now recognized someone who could not be crossed without consequences. Business had actually improved. He had contained the threats, expanded his empire, and emerged stronger. By any objective measure, his revenge was complete. Yet something remained unfinished. Chapter 8: The Reckoning. 6 months after the confrontation in Detroit, Riker Caldwell found himself in Vienna, attempting to rebuild his career far from Dominic Voss's sphere of influence. Despite the non-compete agreement restricting his work and security, he had secured a consulting position with a European investment firm specializing in technology acquisitions. His new life was comfortable, if not the luxury he had once known. His apartment overlooked the Danube, his reputation here untarnished by the scandal in America. He had even begun dating again, a gallery owner named Sophie who knew nothing of his past humiliation. Returning home after dinner with potential clients, Riker froze at his apartment door. It stood slightly ajar, light spilling from within. He considered calling building security, then steeled himself and pushed the door open. Dominic Voss sat in Riker's living room, examining a glass of Austrian whiskey. "Your taste has improved," Dominic commented mildly, gesturing with the glass. "Though your security awareness clearly hasn't." Riker's shock quickly turned to anger. "How did you get in here? What do you want now? You've taken everything already." "Not quite everything," Dominic replied, setting down the glass and standing. "You violated our agreement, Riker." "That's absurd," Riker scoffed. "I haven't worked in security since I left the States." "The agreement wasn't just about competing professionally," Dominic reminded him. "It also specified no contact with Valencia Reed, no discussion of our history with anyone, and most importantly, no attempts to access Vostek or former Rival Edge systems. He produced a tablet displaying logs of access attempts originating from Vienna. Care to explain? Riker's face drained of color. That wasn't me. It must have been Thomas Weiss. Dominic finished for him. Your new research assistant, who happens to be an exceptional hacker. Currently being interviewed by Interpol, by the way. Riker sank into a chair. What do you want, Dominic? More money? Another pound of flesh? I want you to understand something, Dominic said, his voice deceptively conversational. When Valencia betrayed me, it was painful but ultimately insignificant. She was a diversion, a temporary companion. But you attempted to use my parents' memory as a weapon. For the first time, Riker saw raw emotion in Dominic's eyes. My father died protecting others, Dominic continued, each word precise and controlled. My mother spent her life helping people understand the darkness in human psychology. They were exceptional people who died terrible deaths. And you planned to dishonor them for a corporate advantage. Riker swallowed hard. It was just business strategy, psychological warfare. It was the last mistake you'll ever make in business. Dominic cut him off. Your new position? The firm is a Vostek subsidiary. Your girlfriend, Sophie? On my payroll from the beginning. This apartment? Leased by one of my European holdings. He leaned closer. You have existed for the past 6 months because I allowed it, because I wanted to see what you would do when you thought yourself free. Dominic placed a document on the coffee table. New terms. You will transfer all remaining assets to the listed account. You will then relocate to the property in northern Finland detailed here. A position has been arranged at a local technology repair shop. You will accept this position and remain there for a minimum of 5 years. You can't be serious, Riker whispered. Finland? A repair shop? That's exile. That's mercy, Dominic corrected. The alternative involves the evidence of corporate espionage we've compiled, which carries significant prison time in both the U.S. and EU. Riker stared at the document, then at the man who had systematically dismantled his life. You're a monster, Voss. Dominic smiled coldly. No, I'm a strategist. And you chose the wrong opponent. He stood to leave. You have 24 hours to sign and begin compliance. Preston will remain in Vienna to oversee the transition. As Dominic reached the door, Riker called after him, desperation in his voice. Will it ever be enough? Will you ever be satisfied? Dominic paused. You targeted my parents' memory, Riker. The answer is no. Meanwhile, in Detroit, Valencia Reed received a package. Inside was a flash drive and a note in Dominic's handwriting, for your awareness. The drive contained videos, Dominic's meeting with Riker in Vienna, footage of Riker's new girlfriend reporting to Preston, documentation of how thoroughly Dominic had controlled Riker's escape to Europe. The message was clear. There was no escape from Dominic Voss's reach. No matter how far they ran, how carefully they rebuilt, he was watching, controlling, orchestrating. That night, Valencia finally understood the true extent of Dominic's revenge. It wasn't just the public humiliation or the professional destruction. It wasn't even the ongoing surveillance and control. It was the psychological prison he had constructed, one where they could never feel secure, never trust their surroundings, never be certain who might be reporting back to him. As she looked around the house he had given her, the house that symbolized both her shelter and her captivity, Valencia realized that Dominic's revenge would never truly end. She would live the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering if each new acquaintance was his agent, each opportunity his trap. Back in Los Angeles, Dominic reviewed the tracking data, showing Valencia had viewed the files. Another piece in place. Another reminder delivered. Preston voiced what others on the team had begun wondering. How long do you plan to maintain surveillance on them? Dominic's answer was simple. Indefinitely. Is that really necessary? Preston pressed gently. They're neutralized. Contained. It's not about necessity, Dominic replied. It's about principle. They didn't just try to betray me. They tried to use my parents against me, to desecrate their memory. His expression hardened. For that, there is no statute of limitations. Chapter 9. The Legacy. 5 years passed. Dominic Voss had expanded Vostek into a global security conglomerate. His reputation as a brilliant but merciless businessman had grown to near-mythic proportions. Competitors tread carefully. Partners honored agreements to the letter. No one dared cross him. The engagement party incident had become industry legend, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and business schools. Few knew the full extent of what followed, how thoroughly Dominic had orchestrated the ongoing consequences for those who had betrayed him. On a crisp autumn morning, Dominic visited his parents' graves at a private cemetery outside Los Angeles. It was the anniversary of their deaths, the one day each year he allowed himself to publicly acknowledge any personal vulnerability. As he placed flowers on the graves, he sensed someone approaching. His hand moved instinctively toward the concealed weapon he always carried. Still vigilant as ever, came a familiar voice. Dominic turned to see his sister Marissa, who had flown in from Oregon for the anniversary. They embraced briefly. "I wasn't sure you'd come this year," he said. "With the new clinic opening. Some things take priority," she replied, placing her own flowers beside his. After a moment of silence, she added, "I heard about Valencia Reed." Dominic's expression revealed nothing. "What about her?" "She's trying to rebuild her life. Started a small event planning business in Detroit. Doing community work." Marissa studied her brother carefully. "Are you still watching her?" "Of course," Dominic replied matter-of-factly. "And Riker Caldwell? Still in Finland. Still exactly where he should be." Marissa sighed. "Dom, it's been 5 years. Don't you think it's time to let go? Move on?" Dominic turned to look at their parents' headstones. "They targeted our parents' memory. Marissa used their deaths as a tool." His voice hardened. "Some things are unforgivable. Mom was a psychologist," Marissa reminded him gently. "She'd say holding on to this is hurting you more than them." "Perhaps," Dominic acknowledged. "But it's my choice to make." As they walked back to their cars, Marissa made one last attempt. "You know, there's a difference between justice and vengeance. One heals, one perpetuates." Dominic smiled slightly. "I never claimed to be interested in healing, sister." Later that day, in his penthouse office, Dominic reviewed the latest surveillance reports. Valencia had indeed started a small business, was volunteering at a community center, had begun dating a local restaurant owner. Riker had settled into his circumscribed life in Finland, all fight apparently gone. Preston entered with a quarterly security briefing. After discussing business matters, he hesitated before asking, "Have you considered what Marissa suggested about scaling back the monitoring?" Dominic looked up, surprised. "You've been talking to my sister?" "She called me," Preston admitted. "She's worried about you, Dominic. Thinks you're stuck." "Interesting choice of word," Dominic mused. "Do I seem stuck to you, Preston?" "Vostek has tripled in value. We've expanded into 17 new countries. Professionally, you're more successful than ever," Preston agreed. "But personally, when was the last time you allowed anyone close to you?" Dominic waved dismissively. "I have no interest in repeating past mistakes." "Not everyone is Valencia Reed," Preston pointed out. "And constantly monitoring people who betrayed you years ago, it keeps you tethered to that moment." Dominic was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles. "You know what my father told me after the compound attack?" He said, "Dominic, never forget who caused you pain. Memory is power." "With respect," Preston replied carefully, "your father was a military man who lived in constant danger. You've already won. Valencia and Riker have been thoroughly defeated." "Have they?" Dominic turned back. "Or have they simply adapted to their circumstances? If I ceased monitoring them tomorrow, how long before they attempted to rebuild their lives on their own terms? Before they convinced themselves they had paid enough for their betrayal?" Preston recognized the immovable resolve in his friend's expression. "So the surveillance continues indefinitely." "Not indefinitely," Dominic corrected, "until I decide otherwise." He returned to his desk. "Now, about those expansion plans for Asia." That night, alone in his penthouse, Dominic reviewed footage of Valencia's new life. She appeared to be genuinely rebuilding, finding purpose in simpler circumstances than she had once craved. For a brief moment, something like doubt flickered across his mind. Was Marissa right? Was he the one trapped in the past? He closed the surveillance feed and poured himself a whiskey. On his desk sat a framed photo of his parents, the only personal item visible in his meticulously designed space. "Some betrayals can't be forgiven," he said to the empty room. "Some debts can never be paid in full." Dominic Voss had built an empire on that principle. His enemies remained contained, his power expanded, his reputation for ruthless consequence solidified. The world had learned what happened to those who betrayed him. And in the end, that was the legacy he had chosen. Not forgiveness, not healing, but perfect, calculated, unwavering vengeance. Valencia's teary phone calls would remain unanswered, 315 and counting. Forever counting. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Detective Ray Morrison had always prided himself on being a man of principle. At 54, with 28 years on the force, he commanded respect in the small town of Millbrook. His daughter, Linda, had married well, or so he thought. Tom Brennan, her husband of 18 years, was a successful construction contractor who'd built half the new developments in town. Tom was quiet, methodical, and had never given Ray any trouble. Until now. The call came on a Tuesday evening. Ray's grandson, Kyle, had been pulled over for speeding. Nothing unusual there. 16-year-old boys and fast cars were a dangerous combination. But when Ray arrived at the scene, something felt wrong. His partner, Officer Danny Walsh, was acting nervous, sweating despite the cool October air. "What's the story?" Ray asked, approaching Kyle's beat-up Honda Civic. "Kid was doing 45 in a 30, Danny said, not meeting Ray's eyes. "But Ray, we found something." Ray's stomach dropped as Danny led him to the passenger side of the car. There, plain as day, was a small baggie of what looked like marijuana tucked under the seat. "That's not mine," Kyle protested, tears streaming down his face. "Grandpa, you have to believe me." Ray studied his grandson's face. The boy was scared, genuinely terrified. But the evidence was there. In a town where Ray's reputation mattered, appearances were everything. Tom arrived 20 minutes later, his work boots still covered in concrete dust. Ray watched as his son-in-law's face went from confusion to cold fury in the span of seconds. "This is ridiculous," Tom said, his voice deadly calm. "Kyle doesn't do drugs." "The evidence says otherwise," Danny interjected, earning a sharp look from Tom. Ray found himself in an impossible position. His grandson, his daughter's family, his own reputation, all hanging in the balance. The decision he made in that moment would change everything. "I'm sorry, Tom," Ray said, his voice heavy, "but we have to follow protocol." As they handcuffed Kyle and loaded him into the patrol car, Ray caught something in Tom's expression. It wasn't defeat or resignation. It was the look of a man taking notes, memorizing faces, calculating odds. Ray had seen that look before, in the eyes of criminals who were already planning their next move. Chapter 2. Lines Drawn. The Brennan household had never felt colder. Linda paced the living room, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, stress etched across her face. She'd been crying on and off since the call came in about Kyle's arrest. "We need to support Dad," she said for the third time in an hour. "He's just doing his job." Tom sat in his leather recliner, outwardly calm, but internally seething. He'd built this house with his own hands, every board and nail placed with precision. Now it felt like a trap. "Your father planted that bag, Linda." The words hung in the air like smoke from fire. Linda stopped pacing, her face going white. "How dare you?" she whispered. "My father is a good man. He's dedicated his life to this community. Your father is a dirty cop who just destroyed our son's future to teach me a lesson." Linda's hand cracked across Tom's face with surprising force. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. "Don't you ever speak about my father that way again," she hissed. Kyle was probably buying drugs from some dealer and got caught. Dad saved him from something worse. Tom touched his cheek, feeling the sting, but his expression never changed. So that's how it's going to be. That's how it's always been, Tom. Family first. The irony wasn't lost on him. Family first, except when it came to the family he'd built with her. Later that night, after Linda had gone to bed, Tom made a series of phone calls. The first was to Marcus Riley, his lawyer and old college roommate. The second was to a private investigator named Janet Cross. The third was to a number he'd hoped never to use again. Vincent? It's Tom Brennan. I need a favor. Vincent Castellano's gravelly voice carried decades of cigarettes and harder living. Tommy boy, been a long time. What's eating you? Someone hurt my kid. I need information. Information costs extra these days. Money's not a problem. There was a pause. Must be serious if you're calling me. Text me the details. I'll be in touch. As Tom ended the call, he didn't notice Linda standing in the hallway, having heard enough to know that her husband was planning something that would tear their family apart. Chapter 3. The Architect's Blueprint. The next morning brought an uncomfortable family meeting at Ray Morrison's house. Linda's mother, Carol, bustled around the kitchen making coffee while Linda's younger brother, Mike, sat at the dining table looking uncomfortable. Mike was a firefighter, 32 years old, with the same strong jaw as his father but softer eyes. "This is all going to blow over," Carol said, her voice artificially bright. "Kids make mistakes. Kyle will learn from this." Tom sat across from Ray, studying the man who'd raised the woman he'd loved for 18 years. Ray was still handsome at 54, silver-haired and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that commanded rooms. But Tom was looking deeper now, seeing things he'd missed before. "The question is," Ray said, "how do we handle this as a family?" "By telling the truth," Tom replied evenly. "The truth is that your son was caught with illegal substances," Ray shot back. "I could have looked the other way, but that wouldn't have been right." "Dad's right," Linda said, reaching across to squeeze her father's hand. "We can't enable Kyle's behavior." Mike shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should focus on getting him help instead of assigning blame." Tom almost smiled. Mike was the only one in the room with any sense, which made what was coming even more tragic. "Kyle's already talking to a counselor," Tom said. "Court appointed, but he maintains his innocence." "Of course he does," Ray scoffed. "They all do." That afternoon, Tom received his first package from Vincent. It contained surveillance photos, financial records, and a detailed timeline of Ray Morrison's activities over the past 6 months. What Tom found buried in those records made him lean back in his office chair and whistle low. Detective Ray Morrison wasn't just a dirty cop. He was an entrepreneur. The marijuana planted in Kyle's car had come from evidence lockup, part of a larger operation where confiscated drugs were being resold through a network of dealers. Ray wasn't the mastermind, but he was a key player. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was who Ray's primary partner was in the operation, Danny Walsh, the nervous officer who discovered the drugs in Kyle's car. Tom smiled for the first time in days. He was an architect by training, someone who understood that every building needed a solid foundation before you could construct the walls. Ray Morrison had just given him the perfect foundation for his revenge. The second package from Vincent arrived that evening. This one contained something even more valuable, a recording device small enough to fit inside a pen and detailed instructions on how to use it. Linda found Tom in his study, surrounded by papers and photos. "What are you working on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Just some project estimates," Tom lied smoothly. "The Patterson development is moving faster than expected." She moved closer, and Tom casually covered the photos with a blueprint. But Linda had seen enough. "Those look like pictures of my father." Tom looked up at his wife, the woman he'd shared his bed and his dreams with for 18 years, and felt something die inside his chest. "They were pictures of the courthouse," he said, "for the new municipal complex bid." Linda nodded, but Tom could see the doubt in her eyes. She didn't believe him, which meant she'd already chosen her side. That night, as Linda slept beside him, Tom stared at the ceiling and made his final decision. He'd try to build a life based on trust and love, but those foundations had proven faulty. It was time to build something else entirely. something permanent. Chapter 4. Gathering Storms. The preliminary hearing for Kyle's case was scheduled for the following Monday. Tom spent the weekend preparing, but not in the way his family expected. While Linda thought he was meeting with their lawyer, Tom was actually sitting in Vincent Castellano's warehouse office on the wrong side of town. Vincent looked exactly like someone who'd spent 40 years walking the line between legal and illegal. Scarred hands, gray stubble, and eyes that had seen too much. His warehouse was officially an auto parts distributor, but everyone knew Vincent dealt in information, favors, and occasionally harder services. "Your boy's clean," Vincent said, sliding a thick folder across the desk. "Model student, no priors, doesn't even drink. Meanwhile, your father-in-law's been supplementing his pension for the past 2 years." Tom opened the folder and found photographs, bank statements, and phone records. Ray Morrison and Danny Walsh had been skimming from evidence lockup and selling confiscated drugs back to dealers. The operation was small but profitable, about $50,000 over 2 years. "Why frame Kyle?" Tom asked. "Near as I can tell, your boy was just convenient." Morrison needed to show his partner he was serious about maintaining cover. Planting evidence on a relative sends a message: nobody's above suspicion. Tom studied a photograph of Ray counting money in what looked like a storage unit. How solid is this evidence? Solid enough to end careers and start prison sentences. But here's the thing, Tommy. Your wife's been asking questions about you too. That stopped Tom cold. "What kind of questions?" "She hired a PI 3 days ago. Wants to know where you've been spending your time, who you've been talking to. Woman's preparing for war." Tom leaned back in his chair, feeling the pieces of his life rearranging themselves. Linda wasn't just defending her father. She was actively working against her own husband. "There's more," Vincent continued. "Your brother-in-law, Mike? He's been meeting with Linda and your father-in-law. Looks like the whole family's circling the wagons." "Mike's a good guy," Tom said, though doubt was creeping in. "Good guys sometimes do bad things when family pressure gets applied. From what I can see, they're planning to present a united front at the hearing. Your son's going to get thrown under the bus, and you're going to be painted as a delusional father who can't accept his kid's guilt." Tom stood up, his mind already working through contingencies. "I need more than evidence of the drug dealing. I need insurance." Vincent grinned, showing teeth stained by decades of coffee and cigarettes. "Now you're talking my language. What kind of insurance?" "The kind that makes people think twice before they betray family." That evening, Tom returned home to find Linda hosting a family dinner. Ray, Carol, and Mike were all there, along with Kyle, who looked miserable and defeated. The conversation stopped when Tom walked in. "We were just discussing Kyle's future," Linda said, her voice artificially sweet. Tom looked at his son, saw the hopelessness in the boy's eyes, and felt his resolve harden. "And what did you decide?" "Kyle's going to plead guilty to possession," Ray said firmly. "With my recommendation, he'll get community service and probation. Clean slate after a year." "No," Tom said simply. The room went silent. Even Carol stopped serving dinner. "Excuse me." Ray's voice had an edge to it. "Kyle's innocent. He's not pleading guilty to anything." Mike cleared his throat. "Tom, maybe it's better to just put this behind us. Fighting it will only make things worse." Tom looked at his brother-in-law, someone he'd considered a friend for over a decade. "Whose side are you on, Mike?" "I'm on the family's side." "So am I," Tom replied. "The question is, which family?" Linda stood up abruptly. "Kyle, go to your room." "Mom, I didn't." "Now." After Kyle left, the real conversation began. "You're being unreasonable," Carol said. "Ray is trying to help." "Ray is trying to cover his ass," Tom shot back. Ray stood up, his hand instinctively moving toward where his service weapon would normally be. "I think you should be very careful about what you say next, Tom." Tom smiled, and something in that smile made everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. "Are you threatening me, Ray?" "In my own house." The tension was broken by Linda's voice, cold and final. "If you can't support this family's decision, maybe you should leave." Tom looked around the table at faces that had once been welcoming, now closed and hostile. Vincent had been right. They'd already chosen sides. "I'll pack a bag," Tom said quietly. As he headed upstairs, he heard Linda's voice behind him. You have until Monday to come to your senses. Tom paused on the stairs, not turning around. Monday's the hearing. I'll see you in court. Chapter 5. The Perfect Storm. Tom checked into the Millbrook Inn, a small hotel downtown that catered to business travelers and people going through divorces. The irony wasn't lost on him. From his room, he could see the courthouse where Kyle's fate would be decided in 3 days. His phone rang constantly. Linda trying to negotiate, Mike attempting to mediate, even Carol calling to appeal to his Christian sense of forgiveness. Tom let them all go to voicemail. Vincent arrived Sunday evening with the final pieces of Tom's plan. Your father-in-law's been busy, Vincent said, spreading new photographs across the hotel room's small table. He met with the prosecutor yesterday. Looks like they're not just railroading your kid. They're planning to charge him as an adult. Tom's hands clenched into fists. On what grounds? Possession with intent to distribute. They're claiming the amount found was too large for personal use. That's impossible. The bag was tiny. Vincent's smile was grim. Funny thing about evidence lockers, things have a way of growing. My source says the bag that'll appear in court tomorrow will be considerably larger than the one they showed you Tuesday night. Tom stared out the window at the courthouse, his mind racing. They weren't just covering up Ray's corruption. They were actively destroying Kyle to do it. Here's what you asked for, Vincent said, sliding a small device across the table. Digital recorder, voice-activated, 8-hour battery life. Completely undetectable once it's in place. And the other thing? Vincent handed him a manila envelope. Birth certificate, social security records, medical files. Your wife's been busy over the years. More secrets than a politician. Tom opened the envelope and found documentation that made him sit down hard on the hotel bed. Linda hadn't just been hiding things from him. She'd been lying about fundamental aspects of their life together. How long have you known? Vincent asked. I suspected something was off about 5 years ago. But this... Tom held up a birth certificate that showed Kyle wasn't his biological son. The dates didn't lie. Linda had been pregnant before they met, not after. The father, Danny Walsh, your father-in-law's partner. Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. So Kyle has actually raised grandson through Danny, not me. That's why they're so eager to protect the family name. And why they're willing to destroy the kid to protect themselves. If this comes out, it exposes both the affair and the drug operation. Tom stood up and walked to the window. Below, the courthouse looked peaceful in the evening light. Tomorrow, it would become a battleground. Vincent, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I want you to be in that courtroom tomorrow. And I want you to record everything. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Tom dressed in his best suit, navy blue, conservative, the kind of outfit that suggested respectability and quiet confidence. He ate breakfast alone in the hotel restaurant, watching the local news report on the troubled teenager from a prominent construction family. The courthouse was already busy when Tom arrived. Marcus Riley, his lawyer, met him at the steps. Tom, we need to talk, Marcus said urgently. The prosecution just filed amended charges. They're claiming Kyle had enough marijuana for distribution. I know, Tom said calmly. How could you? Never mind. The point is, this changes everything. We're not talking about simple possession anymore. This can mean real jail time. Tom looked at his oldest friend, someone he trusted for 20 years. Marcus, whose side are you on? What do you mean? Are you working for me? Or did someone get to you too? Marcus's face went pale. Tom, you're being paranoid. Nobody got to me. Then why didn't you fight the amended charges? Why are you pushing me to accept a plea deal that ruins my son's life? Marcus looked around nervously. Because sometimes you have to accept reality. Tom nodded slowly. You're right. Sometimes you do. Inside the courthouse, Tom saw his family gathered in the gallery. Linda sat with her parents, Mike beside them, all presenting a united front. They looked like they were attending a funeral, which in a way they were. Kyle sat at the defendant's table, looking small and lost in his oversized suit. When he saw Tom, the boy's face lit up with hope and relief. Dad, you came? Of course I came, Tom said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. The word son felt different now, but the love remained the same. Biology didn't determine family, loyalty did. As the judge entered the courtroom, Tom caught Vincent's eye. The man was sitting in the back row, dressed like any other court observer, his equipment hidden and ready. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Hawkins. Tom stood, feeling the weight of the manila envelope in his jacket pocket. In a few minutes, everyone in this room would understand the true meaning of family loyalty and betrayal. Chapter 6. The Reckoning begins. Judge Hawkins was a stern woman in her 60s, known for running an efficient courtroom and having little patience for theatrics. She'd been on the bench for 15 years and had seen every kind of case Millbrook could produce. "We're here for the arraignment of Kyle Brennan," she announced. What does the defendant plead?" Marcus started to stand, but Tom placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Your Honor, before we enter a plea, I'd like to present evidence that's relevant to this case." Judge Hawkins frowned. "Mr. Brennan, this is an arraignment, not a trial. Evidence presentation comes later." "Your Honor, this evidence directly relates to the integrity of the charges being filed. I believe it's relevant to the court's consideration of bail and plea arrangements." From the prosecution table, District Attorney Robert Shun looked annoyed. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The defense is clearly stalling." Tom stood up. "Your Honor, I'm not the defense attorney. I'm the defendant's father, and I have information that this court needs to see." The murmur from the gallery was immediate. Linda half rose from her seat, her face a mask of confusion and growing alarm. Judge Hawkins considered for a moment. "Mr. Brennan, you have 5 minutes to present whatever evidence you think is relevant. But this better not be a waste of the court's time." Tom reached into his jacket and pulled out the manila envelope. But instead of opening it immediately, he turned to face the gallery. "Your Honor, before I present this evidence, I need to ask Detective Ray Morrison to stand." Ray's face went white, but he stood slowly, his police dress uniform immaculate. "Detective Morrison, you were the responding officer who discovered the alleged marijuana in my son's vehicle, correct?" "I was on scene, yes," Ray said carefully. "And you can swear under oath that the evidence was not planted." D.A. Chin stood up. "Objection. Mr. Brennan is not qualified to conduct an examination." "Sustained," Judge Hawkins said. "Mr. Brennan, get to your point." Tom opened the envelope and pulled out a series of photographs. "Your Honor, these photographs show Detective Morrison and Officer Danny Walsh engaged in what appears to be the sale of confiscated drugs from the evidence locker." The courtroom erupted. Ray sat down hard, his face ashen. Linda was on her feet, shouting something Tom couldn't hear over the general chaos. Judge Hawkins was banging her gavel for order. "Furthermore," Tom continued, his voice cutting through the noise, "I have bank records showing that Detective Morrison has received over $50,000 in unexplained deposits over the past 2 years." D.A. Chun was frantically conferring with his assistants. Ray Morrison looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "Your Honor," Tom said, "I submit that these charges against my son are part of a cover-up designed to protect a corrupt police officer who needed to demonstrate his legitimacy by sacrificing an innocent boy." Judge Hawkins had restored order, but barely. "Mr. Brennan, these are very serious allegations. Do you have proof to back them up?" Tom handed the envelope to the bailiff. "Everything's in there, Your Honor. Financial records, surveillance photographs, and witness statements." "Your Honor," D.A. Chun said desperately, "we request an immediate recess to examine this alleged evidence." "Granted. We'll reconvene in 2 hours." As the courtroom began to empty, Tom felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Ray Morrison, his face a mixture of rage and desperation. "You son of a bitch," Ray hissed. "You have no idea what you just done." Tom looked at the man who'd raised his wife, who'd been a grandfather to Kyle, who'd thrown them all away to protect his own interests. "I know exactly what I've done," Tom said quietly. "I've started telling the truth." Ray leaned closer. "This isn't over." "You're right," Tom replied. "It's just beginning." As Ray walked away, Tom noticed Linda approaching. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes held something he'd never seen before, pure hatred. "How could you do this to my family?" she whispered. Tom looked at the woman he'd loved for 18 years, the mother of the boy he'd raised as his own son, and felt the last of his old life die. I didn't do anything to your family, Linda. Your family did it to themselves. She raised her hand as if to slap him again, but stopped when she saw his expression. Something in Tom's eyes warned her that this time, he might not just stand there and take it. This marriage is over, she said. Yes, Tom agreed. It is. As Linda walked away, Tom turned to Kyle, who'd been watching the entire exchange with wide eyes. Dad, what's happening? Tom put his arm around the boy's shoulders. We're going home, son. Your real home. For the first time in a week, Kyle smiled. Chapter 7. Unraveling. The 2-hour recess turned into an all-day investigation. By 5 o'clock, Ray Morrison and Danny Walsh were in custody, and D.A. Chun was in Judge Hawkins' chambers explaining how his office had failed to properly vet the evidence in Kyle's case. Tom sat in the courthouse cafeteria with Kyle and Marcus, watching the news coverage on the small television mounted in the corner. The scandal was already making statewide news, small-town police corruption exposed by desperate father. How long have you been planning this? Marcus asked quietly. Since the moment Linda slapped me for telling the truth about her father, Tom replied. Kyle looked confused. But Dad, how did you know Grandpa was dirty? Tom studied his son's face. Kyle still didn't know about Danny Walsh being his biological father, and Tom wasn't sure he ever needed to. Some truths were more destructive than helpful. Sometimes you have to dig to find the truth, Tom said. And sometimes the truth finds you. Vincent Castellano appeared at their table like a well-dressed ghost. Mind if I sit? Marcus tensed. Tom, who is this guy? A friend, Tom said simply. Vincent sat down and placed a small digital recorder on the table. Thought you'd want to hear this. He pressed play, and Linda's voice filled the small space around their table. We need to make sure Tom looks unstable, she was saying. If we can show he's having some kind of breakdown, it'll discredit whatever evidence he thinks he has. Ray's voice came next. Danny's already talked to the prosecutor. They're willing to amend the charges to adult felony levels if Tom doesn't back down. What about Kyle? That was Mike's voice. Kyle's expendable, Ray said coldly. Better to sacrifice one kid than lose everything. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, documenting a conversation that had taken place just that morning in the courthouse parking lot. Tom listened to his wife and her family plot against him and Kyle with a detachment that surprised him. Jesus, Tom, Marcus whispered. They were going to destroy you both. Kyle's face had gone pale. Mom really said that? That I was expendable? Tom reached over and squeezed his son's hand. Your mother chose her side, Kyle. Now we know where we stand. Vincent turned off the recorder. There's more if you want it. Your brother-in-law, Mike, wasn't entirely on board with the plan, but he wasn't willing to stand up to his father either. What about the drug charges against Kyle? Marcus asked. Dropped, Vincent said with satisfaction, along with about 6 other cases that Ray Morrison was involved in over the past year. DA's office is in full damage control mode. Tom stood up. Kyle, we're going home. To the hotel. No, to our real home. The Brennan house looked different as they pulled into the driveway. Linda's car was gone, and so was most of the furniture from the front room. Tom wasn't surprised. She was probably at her parents' house, regrouping and planning her next move. They walked through the house together, taking inventory. Linda had been busy during the day's court proceedings. She'd taken her clothes, jewelry, and several pieces of furniture that had belonged to her grandmother. But she'd also taken things that weren't hers. Kyle's computer, Tom's tools, even the photo albums that contained Kyle's baby pictures. She took everything, Kyle said sadly. She took things, Tom corrected. There's a difference. That evening, as Kyle did homework at the kitchen table and tried to pretend everything was normal, Tom sat in his study planning the next phase of his campaign. Vincent had provided him with enough evidence to destroy Ray Morrison's career and send him to prison. But that was just the beginning. His phone rang. Linda's number. Hello, Linda. We need to talk. Her voice was carefully controlled, but Tom could hear the strain underneath. I'm listening. Meet me at Morrison's diner. 1 hour. Come alone. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, you'll never see Kyle again. The line went dead. Tom stared at the phone, feeling a familiar cold anger settle in his chest. Linda had just made her biggest mistake yet. He called Vincent. I need backup, Tom said. What kind of backup? The kind that makes sure I walk out of Morrison's diner in one piece. On my way, as Tom got ready to leave, Kyle looked up from his homework. "Where are you going, Dad?" "To end this," Tom said. "Once and for all." Chapter 8, The Final Gambit. Morrison's Diner sat on the edge of town, a classic American eatery that had been serving truckers and locals for 40 years. At 8 o'clock on a Monday night, it was nearly empty except for a few regulars at the counter and Linda Brennan sitting alone in a back booth. Tom entered through the front door, while Vincent and two of his associates positioned themselves outside. Through the windows, Tom could see them taking up strategic positions around the building. Linda looked up as he approached. She'd been crying, but her makeup was perfect and her posture was straight. Even in crisis, she maintained appearances. "Sit down," she said. Tom remained standing. "You said something about Kyle." "I did." Linda's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. "He's not your son, Tom. Not biologically." "I know." That stopped her cold. "You know, Danny Walsh is his father. You were 3 months pregnant when we met, not 3 months after we got married." Linda's facade cracked slightly. "How long have you known?" "Suspected for years. Confirmed yesterday." Tom slid into the booth across from her. "The question is, why tell me now?" "Because I want you to understand what's at stake here. Kyle belongs with his real family." Tom almost laughed. "His real family? You mean the drug-dealing cops who just tried to frame him for felony possession?" "My father made mistakes. Your father is a criminal who is willing to sacrifice his own grandson to save his own skin." Linda leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Danny wants to be part of Kyle's life. He wants to claim his son. Danny's in jail. He'll make bail. And when he does, he's going to file for custody." Tom studied his wife's face, looking for tells. She was lying about something, but he couldn't pinpoint what. "Even if that were true," Tom said, "Kyle's 16. He's old enough to choose where he wants to live. Not if his legal father is declared unfit." The threat was clear. Linda and her family were planning to attack Tom's fitness as a parent, probably claiming mental instability or worse. "Let me guess," Tom said. "I'm having a breakdown? Paranoid delusions? Making wild accusations against respected police officers?" Linda's silence was answer enough. Tom reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, the recorder Vincent had given him. "You should know that everything you've said in the last 5 minutes has been recorded." Linda's face went white. "You're wearing a wire?" "I'm protecting myself from a family of criminals and liars." "Tom, please." "Here's what's going to happen," Tom said, cutting her off. "You're going to call Danny Walsh and tell him that any attempt to claim paternity or file for custody will result in me releasing certain information to the media." "What information?" Tom smiled coldly. "The information about how Kyle isn't just Danny's son. He's also Ray's grandson through his daughter's affair with his partner. The same partner who's been helping Ray sell confiscated drugs for 2 years." Linda's face crumbled. "You bastard. I'm not finished. You're also going to sign divorce papers granting me full custody of Kyle and waiving any claim to alimony or property settlement." "I'll never." "Or I release the recordings of your family planning to frame an innocent boy for felony drug possession." Linda stared at him for a long moment. "I don't recognize you anymore." "Good," Tom said, standing up. "The man you married was too trusting. He believed in family loyalty and keeping his mouth shut when people he loved did terrible things. That man is gone. What if I refuse?" Tom looked down at the woman he'd once planned to grow old with. "Then you'll find out just how ruthless I can be when someone threatens my son." As he walked toward the door, Linda called after him. "This isn't over." Tom paused without turning around. "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." Outside, Vincent was waiting by Tom's truck. "How'd it go?" "She's going to fight." "Expected that." "You ready for the next phase?" Tom looked back at the diner, where Linda was still sitting in the booth, probably calling her father or her lawyer or both. "What's the next phase?" Vincent grinned. "The phase where we stop playing defense and start playing offense." Chapter 9. Ashes and New Foundations. 3 months later, Tom stood in the ruins of the Morrison family empire and felt something approaching satisfaction. Ray Morrison had been sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for drug trafficking and corruption. Danny Walsh got 3 years for his role in the operation. The Millbrook Police Department was under federal oversight, and half the force had been replaced. Linda had fought the divorce for exactly 6 weeks before Vincent's second phase of evidence convinced her that surrender was her only option. The recordings of her family's conspiracy were damaging, but the financial records showing her knowledge of her father's criminal activities were devastating. She'd signed the papers granting Tom full custody of Kyle and walked away with nothing but her car and her clothes. Kyle was thriving. The boy had started seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma of his arrest and the revelation of his family's betrayal, but he was resilient. His grades had improved, and he'd made the varsity baseball team. More importantly, he'd stopped looking over his shoulder, stopped waiting for the next betrayal. Tom's construction business had actually benefited from scandal. Being the man who'd exposed police corruption and save his son had given him a certain cachet in the community. New contracts were coming in faster than he could handle them. The only casualty Tom occasionally regretted was Mike Morrison. Linda's brother had tried to stay neutral in the family war, but neutrality was a luxury Tom could no longer afford. When Mike had refused to testify against his father, Tom had made sure that Mike's fire department learned about his brother-in-law's prior knowledge of Ray's activities. Mike had been forced to resign and had left town quietly, probably to start over somewhere else. Tom felt bad about that for approximately 10 minutes. Then he remembered Mike sitting at his dinner table, listening to plans to destroy Kyle, and saying nothing. Family loyalty was a fine thing, but it had to run both ways. On a Tuesday evening in January, Tom and Kyle were working together in the garage, rebuilding the engine of Kyle's Honda. The boy had grown 3 inches since the trial and was finally looking his father in the eye when they talked. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Shoot. Do you ever miss Mom?" Tom considered the question while cleaning a carburetor. "I miss the woman I thought she was. But that woman probably never existed. Do you think she misses us?" "I think she misses the life we had. But she made her choice." Kyle nodded, accepting this the way he'd learned to accept most hard truths. "Vincent called today. Said Danny Walsh is getting out next month." Tom's hand stilled on the engine part. "Is he planning to cause trouble?" "Vincent doesn't think so. Apparently Danny's got a job lined up in Colorado. Wants to disappear and start over. Smart man." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of tools and quiet classic rock filling the garage. Finally, Kyle spoke again. "I know about Danny being my biological father." Tom looked up. "How long have you known?" "Since the trial. I heard Linda talking to her lawyer." Kyle shrugged. "Doesn't change anything. You're still my dad." Tom smiled, feeling something warm settle in his chest. "Damn right I am. And if anyone tries to take me away from you again..." Tom's smile turned cold. "They'll learn why that's a bad idea." Later that evening, after Kyle had gone to bed, Tom sat in his study reviewing the final reports from Vincent's investigation. Every loose end had been tied up, every enemy neutralized or neutralized. Ray Morrison would die in prison. Danny Walsh would disappear into obscurity. Linda had remarried within 2 months, a middle manager from the next town over who had no idea what kind of woman he'd taken on. Tom's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. Mr. Brennan? This is Agent Sarachon with the FBI. I wonder if we could speak." Tom's blood chilled. "About what?" "We're investigating some irregularities in the evidence against the Morrison police corruption case. Some of our forensic accountants have questions about how certain financial records were obtained." Tom was quiet for a long moment. "Are you asking if I broke any laws to expose criminals?" "I'm asking if you'd be willing to meet with us to discuss your methodology." Tom thought about Ray Morrison in his federal cell, about Danny Walsh planning his escape to Colorado, about Linda starting her new life with a man who would probably be as naive as Tom had once been. "Agent Shun, I think you'll find that everything I did was in defense of my family. And I'd do it all again." "That's what I was afraid you'd say. Are you planning to arrest me?" "That depends on what we find." "Mr. Brennan, some of the methods used in your investigation suggest professional assistance." Tom smiled. "Agent Shun, I'm a construction contractor who built half this town with his own hands. When someone tries to destroy my family, I build something to stop them. And if we find evidence of illegal surveillance or evidence tampering, Then you'll have to prove it in court. And Agent Shun, I gotten very good at courtroom presentations lately. After hanging up, Tom sat back in his chair and considered his options. The FBI investigation was probably inevitable. Vincent's methods weren't always